Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Waiver wire, trades, roster management. To win in fantasy football, you must remember one simple rule. Never get out hustled. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
From New York down to Texas and all across the fantasy universe, it's draft season in the fantasy world, and that means it is time to hustle. Welcome in, everybody, to the Fantasy Football Hustle. I am Brian Drake, joined alongside FootballGuys.com writer Dwain McFarland. Dwain, what's going on out there, my friend? Welcome in. Sorry I took a week off to go to Virginia Beach with my family, but I'm back, I'm excited, and I'm ready to talk fantasy with you because we are part of the biggest, best podcast network out there, the FulltimeFantasy.com podcast network, and we're growing leaps and bounds by the day. I'm excited to be here. I'm ready to talk fantasy football. I got a beer already cracked because this is the fourth time we tried starting this show. What's going on, buddy?
Man, I'm just hoping that we have this take right. But man, I'm glad you're back. I've missed you. I've got to do a few different pods. I've been doing some things, but it's nothing like being on with, my partner, Brian Drake. So
you're cheating on me with other podcasts now?
Yeah, I'm cheating on you, man. Hey, I was on with some guys today. You can follow them on Twitter at 5 Yard Rush. But they're really trying to they're kind of on the front end of fantasy football in England. Cool. And so I met these guys through the Scott Fish Bowl, right? That's the beauty of Scott Fish Bowl. And so we're playing in our league together. And, I was listening to one of these guys' podcasts because, we're doing the direct messaging, with the people that are in your league from Scott Fish Bowl. Mm-hmm. And people are tweeting out, oh, here's a podcast I do or articles that I write. You kind of try to check everybody's stuff out. And I listen to their stuff. It was really good. And I heard Scott Hansen was doing like an opening spot for their show and stuff. And I'm like, man, I was like, these guys got it going on. But anyway, so I got to join them today. If you're not following them on Twitter, I highly recommend it. Their show is really good. And I love, the fact that fantasy football is spreading, man. It's becoming a worldwide thing. And so England is just another frontier for it.
And all across the landscape, like we said in the open here, it's fantasy draft season. So more and more of you are starting to get back in the game. You're dusting off that old laptop from last year, and you're ready to go dive into some fantasy football content. And maybe you missed it last week and you were on the beach like I was, but Tyreek Hill is not going to get suspended. So we're going to start there and look at how that impacts fantasy football drafts and the Chiefs' offense. So, Dwain, now we know he's not going to be suspended. He has a second-round ADP, according to PlayFFWC.com. Would you take him at the end of the first round? Because I really am strongly considering taking him in the first round in a draft that I have the 11th overall pick. And your thoughts just in general on him and that Kansas City offense, and now Travis Kelce doesn't have to carry the whole weight in all season, and it's just lock and load, Patrick Mahomes, let's put up another 50 touchdowns.
Yeah, I think that it's not something that I would just say, oh, you can't do. I mean, it's not probably going to be a pick I'm going to make at the end of the first round. But the biggest thing is, the days of getting Tyreek Hill right in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, those are gone. He's now a second-round pick. If you think about what this does for the rest of the Chiefs' offense, this does make Patrick Mahomes, again, the clear QB1. I kind of had him in a tier before where I had Luck and Aaron Rodgers as well as Deshaun Watson and Mahomes all clumped pretty close together. He's not going to throw 50 touchdowns again. I mean, just because of regression. I guess if there's somebody that's going to do it, it would be Mahomes. But, it's clearly Pat Mahomes as the QB1 now off of the board. This spreads everything else out a little bit more. If folks want to hear more about that, they can go 4 or 5 podcasts ago. We talked through my projections with and without Tyreek Hill in the offense. So those pretty much stand because nothing's changed. It's not like we're a week or two into camp or anything and any injuries or anything have happened. So it lightens the load a little bit on everybody. But why I wouldn't take Tyreek Hill at the end of the first round is he's just too dependent on efficiency. He's going to see 20 to 22% of the targets. I prefer someone that's going to see between, if I'm going to take him in the first round, I like those 27% plus kind of guys.
Mm-hmm. And there's not a ton of those guys. You're looking at Hopkins, you're looking at Julio.
Hopkins and Adams. Right. Yeah. And I mean, Julio gets a shot at it. Michael Thomas will get a shot at it. Juju Smith-Schuster will have a shot at it. So I mean, the list, to your point, is pretty short, but for me, that's where Tyreek Hill, the appropriate spot where I'm going to start considering him is more around, the mid-second, maybe a little before the mid-second.
Look at the way you could start a draft. Like, for instance, I know I have the 11th pick in a big league that I'm in. You could realistically start Julio Jones, Tyreek Hill. That is fantastic. And then coming around, you're going to get that sweet spot in the third round where you might be able to land Devonta Freeman, Kerryon Johnson, Aaron Jones, all these guys. And then, boom, there's your 2 running backs. So through 4 rounds, that's not a bad way to go. I mean, you're really hoping those running backs break out. But, boy, you're ahead of the game in terms of big-time wide receivers. I don't know if that's how you want to build a roster and kind of hope and pray that running backs fall back to you, but, it's enticing, my friend. It is.
Yeah. Well, heck, why don't you just start with Tyreek Hill and Kelsey, and then why don't you just be the guy that takes Mahomes in the 4th?
Because he won't make it to the 4th round in this league.
Yeah, I'm the guy that I'm not drafting. I won't own Mahomes at all this year. I'll play in 30 leagues. I won't own him one single time. And I love him, and I would like to own him. It's just not the way I'm going to go, about it. He is the one guy, though, if for some reason I was in a draft with a bunch of sharks and he somehow fell to the 6th or 7th round, which I saw a couple of times before, I might consider going ahead and pulling the trigger on him. To your thoughts, just real quick around taking receiver. It's kind of hard for me this year just because the more and more I look at it, I love the middle round receivers this year. So, but to your point, I don't want to force a running back over Tyreek Hill that I may not like as much as Tyreek Hill. So I think, there's a lot of different ways you could go. And one of the ways that you just laid out is obviously that's a viable option.
So if you do that, you're obviously saying running backs don't matter. And I'm just kidding. That's just what Twitter says. But you know who else is saying that right now? I'm still calling them San Diego. I don't give a shit. The Los Angeles San Diego Chargers. Melvin Gordon has said, listen, I'm holding out. I'm not coming to camp unless you guys give me a new deal. He's on his 5th-year option right now. He had 10 touchdowns last year on the ground. Hasn't rushed for 1,000 yards, I don't think, in his career, to be honest. And what's going against him is he's injury prone. He missed time in the fantasy playoffs last year, as many of you well know. I don't believe he's played a 16-game season, maybe once. And the 2 guys who came in after him in Austin Eckler and Justin Jackson did really well, and the team didn't skip a beat. So it's a tough proposition for running backs now, and we'll get to Zeke down the line. But teams don't want to pay them, and they're kind of screwed if you're a running back. What do you do, Dwayne? There's got to be something that comes out because you're basically now one contract players, and then teams go, we don't need you. You're replaceable. See you later.
Yeah, and I think the guys that are trying their hand at this are the ones that teams have invested a first-round pick in, right? Because the way if the agents are probably telling them, look, they value you. They don't want to just totally give up on you. They did spend a first-round pick on you that they could have spent elsewhere. But if these things continue to go this way, I think it could depress running back value again even further. Mm-hmm. There for a while, it was like, teams don't draft running backs anymore. And really, it was mostly just there wasn't enough talented ones coming through, right? So up until, David Johnson, came into the league, before all of that, we were kind of in this dry spell. And then after David Johnson, came into the league, we had this explosion, right, with Todd Gurley and Ezekiel Elliott. Melvin Gordon was in that group. And now, we're flush across the board with running backs, and Saquon Barkley going number 1 overall. So I still believe it's about talent, but these kind of things could potentially push even those more talented backs, down the board if these guys are going to continue to try to hold out. And I don't necessarily blame them either. We're going to talk about Ezekiel Elliott as well. And I see, if I'm Zeke, from a business standpoint, I understand it. He's thinking, look, these other guys are holding out in their last year. They're not getting anything. The team's saying they're going to be at a stalemate. I should do it now because Dallas is at least thinking, man, we've only gotten 3 years out of our first round investment. We at least want the 4th and 5th years. Plus, he's making Dallas think about his money versus spending it all on Dak and Amari and then thinking about his money later. And I think the other thing is these guys have seen what happened to Le'Veon Bell. They saw him get forced to play under the tag, those seasons. And not that necessarily that's the worst thing. if you're a running back that's playing really well, I mean, and you're getting, the max franchise tag cash on 2 years in a row, it's nice, but you're also betting that you don't get hurt, because if you get hurt, you may not get the tag the next year and another team may not sign you. So I get it. I get what these guys are trying to do, but to your point, you're just kind of between a rock and a hard place if you're a Melvin Gordon owner like you are in the Scott Fish Bowl. Drake, while you were gone, there was good news and bad news. You own Tyreek Hill. Good news. You also own Melvin Gordon.
Yeah, head over to fightingchancefantasy.com, by the way, if you want to read my Scott Fish Bowl diary article. Cheap plug over there. You can follow me on Twitter at Drake Fantasy also. But
yeah, Brian shares all of his feelings in his diary, so make sure you guys go check that out.
Right. Here's my feeling on running back. If I'm a high school kid, there's 0.0 chance that I'm going to line up and play running back because there's no future. Put me at receiver if you're that talented. If you're that body type, put me at linebacker. Put me at D end. Give me somewhere. If you're that caliber of athlete that's going to play D1 football and then have a chance at the pros, don't go play running back. That's idiotic.
Linebacker is going to be the next position that this is going to happen to, because if running backs start to go away, linebackers start to go away, right? More money's going to nickel backs and things like that. But anyway, like from a fantasy perspective, Drake, we've got folks that may, for whatever reason, have an early draft coming up, or, maybe Melvin Gordon is one of your keepers. You're starting to think about questions like that. For Gordon right now, I think the kind of, sweet spot for him in a draft is I'm not taking him before Dalvin Cook. I'm not taking him over Nick Chubb right now. I think once you get past Nick Chubb and you kind of get right around that spot of Marlon Mack / Aaron Jones, Kerryon Johnson, you start getting into that mix of players. I think that's where the consideration starts to begin. Those guys that I listed before, like I'm not taking him over Joe Mixon, not taking him over James Conner. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else I'm missing in the second round. I'm not going to take him over even Damian Williams. I'm going to take those guys all over Melvin Gordon because I know what their roles are and I like their offenses enough and I like their upside enough that even I wasn't drafting Melvin Gordon anyway this year. Just it wasn't that I was just avoiding him. I like his offense, but it's some of the stuff, that you've said, around his injuries. He's only had 1,000 yards one time. And they've got other running backs that they like to use. So if he was falling to like the very end of the first, I was taking him, but otherwise I wasn't. So for me, I kind of had him graded similar to a lot of the other guys I just named anyway. So I would wait till they're all gone. And then once they're gone, there's still other receivers that I trust, right? Like Mike Evans, you're probably talking Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, Adam Thielen, T.Y. Hilton. You start getting him around in that mix of players. I'm probably going to go ahead and let him slide past those as well. So I'm probably looking at a mid-third to late third before I consider Melvin Gordon. Right. If I'm drafting today and I only get to draft one team, now, me, Drake, I'm different. So I try not to just espouse what I do because I draft 30 teams. So I'll probably draft a team while I'm on vacation and I'll draft Melvin Gordon just on the chance, right, that I want to own some cheap Melvin Gordon shares in case, he comes back, but I'm going to have 30 teams. A lot of people that are listening to us, they're going to have one or two. So if that's your style and that's what you're doing, then I'm definitely fading Melvin Gordon at least until the mid-third.
So you've got Austin Eckler and Justin Jackson who can very formidably come in and fill that running back void for LA. Currently, Eckler's ADP is 90. Justin Jackson's a free pick at 151. They both can fill that running back hole. Eckler being a very good receiver, I'm not as big a fan of him running between the tackles. I think Jackson's better at that, the 7th-round pick last year. They, I think, would feed off each other, and it would be a full-blown committee. I don't think one of these guys would take over and just be, it's the Austin Eckler show. I don't think that LA would do that. Do you?
No, I think what you're probably looking at, I went ahead and projected it out like what I thought it would look like without Melvin Gordon.
Oh, nice.
And I think you're looking at, right around 45% of the carries to Eckler, probably, 35-45% to Jackson as well. But I think Eckler, they're going to be really close, right, from that standpoint, of carries. Sorry, I'm reading it backwards. I have Jackson at 45% of the carries, and I've got Eckler at like 35 to 40% of the carries. But I see Eckler continuing to get much more pass work, right? So I have him at right around 15 to 20% target share. So his target share was already right around a 10. So he gets a 5 to 10% bump with that. I don't see Justin Jackson getting as much of the passing work. So I think they're both viable. Eckler is going to be the safer pick because he's going to have the floor every week because of the PPR receptions. And Justin Jackson is going to probably be a little bit more game script dependent. But the good news is the Chargers have a really good offense and they're going to play from ahead a lot. So I don't think that's necessarily a challenge, except when you're playing like the Chiefs, or some of the better teams on your schedule. So I think Justin Jackson right now, that's just too cheap. Justin Jackson should be going in the 11th to 10th round. He should be going in the same range as your Alexander Madisons, your Justice Hills, your Peyton Barbers, Damian Harris. He should be going with all those guys right now.
This is going to hit near and dear to you. You're a Dallas Cowboys fan, okay? We're talking running backs here and guys who want to get paid, and Ezekiel Elliott has 2 years left on his contract, and there's rumors swirling out there that he may hold out. Ezekiel Elliott, to me, is the best running back in football. He is the identity of that offense. I believe there's a stat out there that Dak Prescott is something like 0-7 when Zeke rushes for less than 75 yards. I can't see Dallas not ponying up. And Jerry Jones, because he's wearing his heart on his sleeve, he wants to win another Lombardi before he kicks the bucket. What do you feel about this situation? I don't know crap about Tony Pollard and these guys behind him. What's your thoughts being a guy in Dallas? What's the word there on this situation?
Yeah, I mean, just right now it sounds, honestly, it's like Zeke's trying to send a message. Nobody's super concerned that it's legit going to happen because there's 2 years left on the deal. Zeke would be leaving a decent amount of money, on the table if he really planned on just sitting out 2 years. He does seem to be the kind of guy, though, that, could do something like that. He's definitely pro Cowboys, but at the same time, to prove a point, Zeke seems like the type of guy that might do something like that. So I wouldn't put it 100% out of the question. To your point about Jerry Jones, and Stephen Jones, this just puts them in a really tough spot because they have to get Dak's deal done. They need to get Amari Cooper's deal done. They just traded a first-round pick for him this, last year, and they've had some hangups there. They thought his contract would be easier, and as each wide receiver domino falls, I think Amari is thinking, "I'm better than that guy. I'm better than that guy," and he is actually. Amari's kind of almost, I don't want to say forgotten, but fantasy players I think a lot of folks don't realize how good Amari Cooper really is. When you watch him, he's almost uncoverable. He creates so much separation. He's a good route runner. He's strong. He can be applied to all different areas of the field. He can run slants. He can, run underneath stuff. He can run intermediate. He can run deep routes. He can win jump balls. He's one of the more complete receivers in the game. Does he have concentration lapses? Sure. Does he? He sure does. Does he scream and, yell at the top of his lungs that he's the best receiver like Odell Beckham Jr. and all the rest of those guys? No. So you don't hear about, that stuff as much. But Amari's a really good receiver, and the Cowboys have to figure out what to do with him. So they're kind of in a tough spot here because, and like I said a minute ago, I don't blame Zeke. He's basically, I think what he's trying to force here is before you pay those guys all this money, don't forget me. Yep. I need my money too. And so the Cowboys are going to, honestly, they need to figure out how to not have to overpay Dak because Dak is not an elite quarterback. Amari Cooper is an elite receiver, and Ezekiel Elliott is an elite running back. Dak Prescott is a decent quarterback, but the problem is this is a quarterback league, and having a decent quarterback matters probably more than having an elite running back.
Right.
If you just have to pick between the two.
See, I'd rather have Zeke than Dak any day of the week, but the problem is it's tough to say.
It's easier.
You can replace a running back, I guess. You're not going to replace him with that caliber. But if you don't have that quarterback waiting in the wings, like on your roster,
yes,
you're screwed.
It's tough.
And they don't have that on their roster right now.
That's right. Quarterbacks, even just having a decent one. I'm interested to see, this is a different topic. We can jump back here to what fantasy implications are with Zeke. Just right off, just share with everybody, I'm not changing anything right now about Zeke. In fact, every time he falls to 6 or 7 or 8 or anything like that, if I'm in a draft, yes, because I could be wrong, but I feel like Ezekiel Elliott's deal is going to get worked out.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I hope it does, because in one of my dynasty leagues, where I do really well, but my 2 running backs, Drake, are Melvin Gordon and Ezekiel Elliott.
Yikes!
Yeah, could be in some real trouble.
Who's your
back
flex?
To your point,
Sony Michel?
No.
We'll get to him next.
No, it's Mark Ingram. But yeah, so it's not like I got spring chicken waiting. But just real quick to your point on running back, it's not that it doesn't. To your point, it's going to be hard to replace Zeke, but it's easier to find a running back and make do if you don't have your quarterback plan in place. What I would like to see teams do over the next 5 to 10 years is find a way to keep some flexibility around even mediocre quarterbacks. I feel like that's another thing that people get overcommitted to. And then it's like, how do you really go change the direction of your franchise and try to get a better quarterback or have cap room to carry maybe a couple of quarterbacks that you really like?
Right.
Because it's also not good to go load up on a quarterback and then you figure out 2 years later that you've missed, because usually they're getting 5, 6, 7 year deals.
Right. Every deal in the NFL is going to be structured as a 2-year deal. There's going to be outs for these teams. And most of them are. If you look like Nick Foles' contract, it's kind of like that. Even Carson Wentz. These teams can get out of them. The players at this point, they just want that guaranteed money. So like, what am I going to get to sign? But then they spread that out over a few years. And if you're not on the roster and they get rid of you, then you don't get anything. But
well, your team, the Eagles, there are teams that are doing that more. There's also teams that are still not. So they're kind of setting, the bar for the way that teams should better handle that.
There are teams like our boys in Los Angeles, the Chargers don't even have an analytics department at this point, but we digress. Yeah. Who are these guys behind Zeke? If, God forbid, he held out, let's say, who would we target here in this backfield?
Yeah,
Darius, is he going to come back and play with the star on the helmet?
Who knows? I mean, my guess is there could be a move at runner, but Darius Jackson and Mike Weber are probably the 2 guys that would battle out for the typical carries. I think what would happen is if Zeke is out, Tony Pollard would get an expanded role and more like an Alvin Kamara light-esque, right? Kind of light-esque. That's Alvin Kamara light-esque. Try that. So he would be more of the pass catching down, maybe get 20, 30% of the carries. And for all we know, they could split, the other, 50% that Dak doesn't take between Darius Jackson and Mike Weber. It could literally be a 3-way committee. I don't really know for sure. My gut says that it would be Mike Weber and Tony Pollard, but Darius Jackson has done just enough that they've kept him around.
Let's switch over now to the Patriots and the aforementioned Sony Michel. So he had a knee scope this offseason. We don't really know what his health is right now. They placed him on the active PUP today. So the Damian Harris hype train is going to be through the roof. Now, Sony Michel, in 13 games last year, almost ran for 1,000 yards. It would take Peyton Barber 11 years to do that. But let's look at Sony Michel here in terms of where he's going in drafts. He's currently a 5th-round pick, okay? So if you're going to grab him at 60, or you can wait another 61 picks, according to FFWC ADP, and get Damian Harris, I'm waiting all day and taking Damian Harris. There's no way in hell Sony Michel's going to be on one of my rosters with this tricky knee.
Yeah, I agree. I think you just laid out the path for folks. And the thing to be watching there is the Damian Harris Burkhead thing, right? Because this is a team that is carrying Brandon Bolden because they like him for special teams. Then you've got, Sony Michel, that's 2. Damian Harris is 3. Rex Burkhead is 4, right? So, I mean, it's going to be a deal where, and then, James White. How can we forget James White? James White's the receiving back. Yeah, I know. He's so ingrained. It's like he's just automatically there, right? I don't have to think about it. But that's 5 guys. That's a lot of guys to keep, right, on your squad. And we know Bolden's going to be active for special teams. Burkhead could be the odd man out. But if he's not the odd man out, even when and a lot of this may depend on Michel's knee, but if Michel's knee continues to act up and they've got to do something, as far as shutting him down, I don't expect Damian Harris just, to run away with this role. It's going to depend on how does Burkhead look too, because they really like Rex Burkhead. So, but I am with you. If I'm drafting a Patriots running back right now, it's Damian Harris. And then in the very, with my last pick, I'm like tacking on Rex Burkhead with it. Obviously I've taken James White if I can get him in the 6th round, 7th round several times, especially if I've gone receiver heavy early, I'll draft James White. But it's honestly, it's a backfield where I don't want to spend a lot of early picks just because they've just has so many guys.
And they've got a lot of guys at wide receiver, and not many of them being very good, but they're going to need some people to step up because Adam Schefter is reporting that Julian Edelman is going to be sidelined for a couple of weeks with a thumb injury. So the Super Bowl MVP should be fine, but he is 33 years old, and it's an injury, and we've got to be cognizant of that. I'm totally locked into the fact that we are going to be talking on the Fantasy Football Hustle about Dontrell Inman and Maurice Harris as week 1 waiver wire pickups, because one of those guys is going to end up starting for the Patriots and is going to catch a touchdown and is going to go for 120 yards, and he's going to be the hot name in fantasy football.
I don't think you have to wait that long. I think it's going to happen right away in preseason because we won't see Edelman, right? So we'll be seeing N'Keal Harry and then whoever else they're rolling out there with Dorsett, whatever the case may be. I'm already seeing Dorsett get drafted occasionally, right, with this news. So, but I'm with you. This thing is a non-story to me. Julian Edelman and Tom Brady, they're simpatico. It's they know each other like the back of each other's hands. So I don't think this is a big deal. Honestly, I think this is good because it just means Julian Edelman doesn't hurt something that's a lot more serious because he is an older guy. I'm fine with seeing him get less work in camp. This actually makes me think more about Julian Edelman because I have a little bit less risk as far as him potentially being hurt or getting a season-ending injury, late in the preseason.
Let's stick with white wide receivers here, and let's go over to Cooper Kupp, who avoided the active PUP today. So you remember his season last year? He had a weird collar. Was it a collarbone? He got horse collar tackled, and he was down. And then he came back after missing a week, and he had a big, long touchdown. But then he had a non-contact injury, blew out the ACL. So Cooper Kupp went down, I believe that was week 10 last year. So he's looking to be okay. Where would you draft Cooper Kupp and that offense we've talked about extensively this offseason? He's got an ADP right now of 49. Is that too high for a guy coming off an ACL?
This is good. I was leaning towards yes, it's too much, but this is really good news for him, because what I'm hoping is that this now allows him to use preseason to gain the confidence in his knee, right, and knock the rust off. What you don't want to see is a guy that they keep off of the field and then really because they're protecting him. And then all of a sudden he's going to be active week 1 when he hadn't done a lot in the preseason because you just don't know how confident the guy's going to be in his ability to do the things that he does really well, which is separate through, a lot of, really quick, sharp cuts right through his breaks. He's got to be 100% willing to do those things at full speed. He's got to trust his knee to hold up. So for me, this is really positive. And as long as we see the momentum continue to build with him, I'm not drafting the Rams receivers really much in the 4th, 5th round, just because I see too many other potential plays that I like that could give me more upside as far as volume goes. The problem with the Rams is you're 100% depending on efficiency because they're all going to see 20% of the targets, basically. They each cap each other out. It's great for Jared Goff. It's great for the running backs that play in that system because it's a handful for any defense to think about, especially when you're running 11 personnel, 90% of your snaps and 65% of the time you're under center. Defenses just aren't used to that crap. So it's really good if you're in the running game there. But if you're a receiver there, it's you can be the guy that's on the up week or the guy that's on the down week. The good news is none of those guys usually see the 2 for 15 week, right? Mm-hmm. Their floors are a little better than that, and they also get involved some in the running game. But if I were to draft a Rams receiver that I thought had the most upside, it might be Kupp, just because what he was doing with Jared Goff in the red zone was pretty, you could tell he was turning into Jared Goff's guy. And so for me, if I were to take a Rams receiver, and right now Kupp is the cheapest, he would be the one I would take, even though the injury is there. And that's just because now he's actually active, and he's the only one I see that I can feasibly think, he's got an upside to 10 touchdowns. Any of them could hit that,
Sure.
But he's the one that I would be most likely to predict it for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I get that. I like Cooper Kupp. I'm just always very wary of anybody coming off the ACL because, like we see with Darius Geis, they come off the ACL, then there's always a hamstring. Think Dalvin Cook last year, same story. They're trying to overcompensate. I want to stay away. If you had an ACL, give me a full year. Quarterback might be a little different because you're not running as much, but these skill position guys, I got to pump the brakes. To everybody's rushes back like, oh, they had an ACL 7 months ago, and now they're back running around. Like, I don't know about that one. You ever see the old the SNL skit where a bunch of old people get Alexas from Amazon and they ask it questions? They're like, and they never know the name. They're like, Alyssa, what's the weather outside? And it's like, it's 75 and sunny. And they all go, I don't know about that. That's me with guys who get these great clean bills of health after an ACL. So it's like, hey Alexa, what's Cooper Kupp doing out there? Oh, he's running routes at full speed. He's going to be ready to go for week 1. I don't know about that.
Hey, I think that's fair.
So, hey, you're listening to the Fantasy Football Hustle. I'm Brian Drake from FightingChanceFantasy.com. That's Dwain McFarland. He writes for FootballGuys.com. Follow him on Twitter at Dwain McFarland, DWAIN. That's how you spell his name. And head over to FullTimeFantasy.com. Play FFWC.com. Get in some of their fun drafts. They've got drafts. Dwayne's been in them. High-stakes leagues for not a lot of cash. Or if you want to risk, your whole week's paycheck, they got leagues for that too. Get in there. Have some fun. Go against other people who are big-time into fantasy football just like you are. Play FFWC.com or FullTimeFantasy.com. A lot of fun over there. Great guys helping us out here with our podcast network. Proud to be a member of that. So let's head up now to Titletown in Green Bay. And we got a couple of guys we want to talk about here. Let's start in the backfield with Aaron Jones. And I don't know if there's a player, Dwayne, that I'm hearing more hype about as a breakout candidate at the running back position than Aaron Jones. Everybody loves him in the 3rd round right now. Almost ran for 1,000 yards last year. I think, what did he have? 8 to 10 touchdowns. Everyone's thinking he's going to be the man. Jonathan Williams is dead, apparently. LaFleur is going to feed him the rock. I mean, are we sure about this? Or are there going to be some tricks here where all of a sudden we're like, oh, Jesus, Williams is still here and he's getting carries and Jones can't stay healthy like every other freaking year of his career. Are we putting too much in the Aaron Jones basket right now?
Yeah, he's a guy that's moving up. And so what we'll do with these guys this is kind of, like a segment that I think we'll continue to do throughout, preseason. And so I don't know what we call it, Drake. Is it preseason clues? Or if you want to just, make it sound really cute, it could be camp clues.
Ooh,
yeah. But what I try to do here is I'm going to give folks as much as I can, some actionable advice that they can be. These are the things I'm watching for in camp and in preseason to determine, right, whether I'm going to continue to value Aaron Jones where he's at, or maybe he becomes more valuable or less valuable, right? So the biggest thing to watch with Aaron Jones, and you said Jonathan Williams, I do that all the time. I'm glad it just wasn't me, but Jamal Williams.
Whatever.
Yeah, his real backup that is probably the guy I'd rather have is also last name Williams, but first name Dexter, who I draft in every fantasy draft. So for whatever that's worth for folks listening, that's a name to be remembering is Dexter Williams. But Aaron Jones, the thing that we need to see is whenever Aaron Rodgers is on the field, so it probably won't be this first preseason game. It'll be the 2nd or 3rd preseason game. And what we want to see is at least a couple of times where they are in obvious down and distance situations passing. And we want to see is Aaron Jones on the field either to be a quick check down, or are they trusting him to block? Because last year, that's how Jamal Williams got on the field. He got on the field because they trusted him more as the blocker. But the blocking scheme and the way they're going to handle blitzes will now change with the way Matt LaFleur is going to be running the offense. So that's the thing that we want to be looking for. The other thing that you're going to see a lot more of is you're going to see a lot more play from under center. They could even try some pistol or things like that because, Aaron Rodgers is pushing back a little bit. Hey, I played in the shotgun. This is what I do. But Rodgers needs to work with LaFleur here because this is the same scheme, right, that set Matt Ryan up for, a huge season 2 years ago with Kyle Shanahan. This is the same scheme that we've seen Jared Goff go from a nobody to a somebody with Sean McVay. So I would love to see what could happen with one of the best quarterbacks in the league when they get paired with this system, right? Sure. Now, LaFleur's still got things to prove as a play caller. He has not shown what Kyle Shanahan has shown. He has not, he doesn't have skins on the wall that McVay does, but he's running the same scheme. And so the big thing with Aaron Jones, we want to see more under center, and we really want to see if he's out there on 3rd and 8 or 2nd and 11, and they're in the shotgun because, they know they're passing, and do they trust him? If they do, he's going to be a 3-down back, and he's every bit worth this pick. In fact, if I'm seeing that consistently, I don't have any problem picking him at the end of the second. I might not have a problem picking him towards the middle of the second, depending on how I'm feeling around on some of the other players, that are getting drafted in that range based on what, news we're getting.
Wow. I like that. That's ballsy right there. But you know what? That's what
if you don't see it, Drake, the opposite is if you don't see it.
Oh, head for the hills.
If that's not, you can't draft him here. Then he moves down into the tier with, to me right now, he's above Kerryon Johnson and Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's the name I was going to say. He's Derrick Henry.
Right.
I can't draft guys that don't catch passes. In fantasy football in 2019, you have to catch passes as a running back. And if you don't, go F yourself. I'm not drafting you.
Right.
It doesn't make sense. You're not going to win. And the point of fantasy football is to win your league.
And he'll never be as bad as Derrick Henry from a passing standpoint. He's going to get work even if he's not the blocker because he'll get that on the other downs. But the problem is you're into a situation where you're in a timeshare and to your point with Derrick Henry, the bigger point is game scripts are now driving how much you get to be on the field. Because if the Packers are down in a game by 2 touchdowns, he ain't going to touch the field. In 2-minute drills, he's not going to be on the field. And, dude, what's your favorite 2 minutes with NFL Red Zone of the whole day? Isn't it when everybody's in the damn 2-minute drill heading into halftime and all of a sudden there's like 30 touchdowns that go up in like 5 minutes? You're like, wow, I was just losing over here in this league. And now all of a sudden I just got 4 touchdowns in like 1 minute from all these players. It's because all these teams go into hurry up. They're running their high pace offense, right? And they're trying to score points at the end of the half. Aaron Jones won't get to be on the field to enjoy that bliss if we don't see him in that situation. So if you don't see him there, you've got to move him down to the end of the 3rd round, beginning of the 4th round.
Let's slide over to their wide receiver battle here, and depending on the day, the site you read, and the beat writer quoted, it's either Marquez Valdez-Scantling is the next coming of Randy Moss, or Geronimo Allison is now Julian Edelman in the slot. So we don't really know, and that's what we're going to focus on here, Dwayne, is who's going to take that slot role, because we think that it has some very, very high potential for fantasy points. And let's see how it's going to get divvied up, because where do you see target share inside and outside? Say Allison is inside and Scantling, MVS, is on the outside. How do you think their target share changes, and who becomes more valuable at that point?
Actually, I think the question is a different question on this one. What we know that Allison's the slot. That was confirmed today. MVS is still the outside guy. You monitor that. Is MVS still staying the 2? The bigger thing here is LaFleur going to run more 11 personnel? So when he was under Sean McVay runs 11, which is 3 wide receivers, about 90% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
LaFleur's other routes are Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan does not run 11 near as much. He's more like a 50% 11 guy. And then he's running 21, which is 2 running backs, because he loves the fullback, right? DeMarco and Juszczyk and those guys. So with those guys, he'll run 30 to 40% from 21. Well, last year, LaFleur didn't have a fullback. And even with Delaney Walker hurt in Tennessee, He ran 12 personnel, which is 2 tight ends, 30% of the time, and he ran 11, 56% of the time. So his percentage of 11 was actually much more in alignment with Kyle Shanahan's style offense, not with what we have seen from Sean McVay. Now, that doesn't mean what's going to happen. What I think LaFleur is going to he's going to have to determine which personnel set is going to really be my base set, which one gives us the best chance to win, and then how much am I going to use the other one. The thing that's intriguing, right, is you've got a really good blocker in Mercedes Lewis. You've got Jimmy Graham, an older veteran. You brought in Jay Sternberger, who you and I both love. Mm-hmm. And then you've got Robert Tonyan, who is a guy that's, kind of forgotten, but they've got 4 tight ends. They could run 12 personnel quite a bit. So that's what you're watching for in Green Bay. If they're going to be running 11 personnel 80-90% of the time, you should be drafting Geronimo Allison in every single draft in the 9th to 10th rounds, because what he's going to do, he's essentially going to give you the value of Cooper Kupp that we just talked about 5 rounds later. Mm-hmm. However, if it looks like they're going to be running more multiple, meaning let's say they settle in at 65%, which is the league average, 11 personnel, and then they want to use 12, as their second set, right? And then they have some other, they'll sprinkle in 4 or 5 other sets. But if those become their 2 primary sets, now all of a sudden it could become more game flow dependent, right? Or matchup dependent. Then all of a sudden, what you thought you had in Geronimo Allison, even though he is a very trusted wide receiver for Aaron Rodgers, he's the only wide receiver last year in the whole year. I think you and I talked about this a couple of episodes ago, Drake. He was the only one that when he was healthy, he actually was taking targets away from Devontae Adams. Once he was gone, Devontae Adams' target share was basically like 30, 35% every single game. Whenever Allison was in there, he was holding Devontae Adams around 25, 26, 27, because Allison was the true number 2 and was on track for a really good season. He was going to hit 1,000 yards, probably have 6-7 touchdowns. So the trust is there with Aaron Rodgers. All those things are there, but you've got to step back and figure out, and that's what I want to watch from the preseason is if they're not going to run 11, 90, 85, 80% of the time, it's going to get a lot harder to pick the weeks that Geronimo Allison is going to be valuable. And it's going to give Marquise Valdez-Scantling more time on the field without Geronimo Allison to build that rapport with Aaron Rodgers. So for me right now, MVS is actually the safer play because he's going to be shielded from whichever decision LaFleur makes, because we may not be able to determine it. He may not really show all of that in the preseason, right? We may only get 2 or 3 drives to determine that. We don't even know for sure why he may be deploying those looks in the preseason. It may be more about evaluating a certain player, right, than it is about, what's my scheme going to look like? So I'm leaning MVS right now. A, I think he has more upside just as a talent. And B, I think he's shielded from, if LaFleur starts to lean more to 12 or something else, he's still going to be one of the guys that's on the field all the time. I still love Allison. I still want to draft him. You know me, dude. I've been talking about Allison since June.
Mm-hmm. Geronimo Allison with an ADP in the FFWC of 89. Last year, if you look at the first 4 weeks of the season, he was a top 30 wide receiver in PPR. And he was getting 7 targets a game, and he was putting up points. So he was very productive. But don't forget, MVS later in the season, he had a stretch of 5 games where he was a top 25 receiver. So we have to really monitor this. Keep listening to the show. Follow Dwayne's Twitter feed at Dwain McFarland. This is a guy you're going to want to draft, whoever that number 2 is here in Green Bay. So it's great information, Dwayne, and I can't wait for it to come out because I'm going to be targeting one of those guys. The secondary receiver in Pittsburgh is also a situation we're going to be monitoring closely. And is that between Dante Moncrief and James Washington? They got Deontay Johnson, the rookie. What do you make of these guys here in Pittsburgh? Because holy smokes, are there targets to go around?
Yeah, I think with James Washington, his ADP is actually falling, right? And Dante Moncrief's is increasing, so I like that. That makes James Washington. I was drafting him, whenever I could get him in the 9th and 10th round, and now he's sliding into an 11th and 12th round. So he's a guy that I'm continuing to take. What you need to watch for with him in the preseason is if he is really on the same page with Ben on some of this timing type of stuff, right? Because I think Moncrief, where based on everything I'm reading, and it's kind of reading the tea leaves right now, we still got to watch and see how it plays out. I think Moncrief is going to be more the deep guy. He's going to be the guy that's kind of like the Martavis Bryant, the Darius Hayward-Bay, you name it, Sammy Coates. They've always got a guy like that can uncork the top, right, on the defense. And I think that's going to be Moncrief this year. I think their hope is that James Washington really is the guy that can help take more of that load that Antonio Brown is leaving behind. But what we need to see is how does he look on, and this is something that I actually asked Matt Waldman about when I was on a podcast with him a couple of weeks ago talking about the Steelers. This is the exact question I asked Waldman, is, okay, so what are we watching for from James Washington to know that he has matured and we can start to really consider him as the potential number 2 in Pittsburgh versus, him ending up, down the pecking order again as the 4th or 5th option. And what Waldman shared with me is what we really need to see is him just to work a wider variety, right, of his routes. He needs to be able to show that he can really either earn separation on quick in-breaking and out-breaking routes instead of just crossers and fades and things like that. He needs to show that his route tree is opened up and that Ben is in time with him. And so the other thing that he felt like he needs to show is that he has to be able to win in situations where he's dealing with contested catches or he's in traffic. Mm-hmm. So those are the things to really be watching for with James Washington, and also be watching Moncrief, see if really he is kind of looking like the guy that they're just going to use more deep. Obviously, they're going to use them both deep, but Washington is a guy that for whatever reason, it's kind of funny to me, Drake, and we've talked about him a lot. People they dismiss him. He was a second-round pick last year, and because he didn't flash onto the scene, and I'm not sure how he would when Juju Smith-Schuster and Antonio Brown are each getting like 25% of the targets, it's funny how much James Washington, usually a young receiver with potential opportunity in front of him, usually when those two things intersect, people are really excited. And for whatever reason, people are cooling on James Washington. And I think most of it is just because of the Dante Moncrief puff pieces.
Right.
And here's my thought on Moncrief. He's a solid player and everything, and I'm not just going to totally dismiss him either. But it's not like he didn't get to play with a good quarterback. He played with Andrew Luck.
Sure.
He had a chance to do some things and he never did. And he is a guy that I liked coming out of college. But for me, James Washington's the guy they invested the second round pick in. So we just got to keep an eye on it. He's falling in drafts. So just continue to utilize that to your advantage. The cheaper he gets, the less risk involved, right?
Sure.
The less continuing to take him.
And if Dante Moncrief wasn't there, James Washington would be getting Chris Godwin hype right now. Because people, I still think, are underestimating the well over 100 targets that are available in this Steelers offense. So it's either going to all go to Juju, who can't get more than the 125 or whatever he got last year. I mean, he got 8,000 targets. And you got Vance McDonald's either going to pick those up, and that's going to make him a top 5 tight end. Or one of these two receivers is going to pick it up. It's got to go to somebody.
And to me, people are putting the wrong bet down. It seems like everybody wants to think that Moncrief is the person. And Moncrief is the one of all those that has the ADP that's rising. Mm-hmm. The two that I like the most are Vance McDonald and James Washington. So I'm going to keep taking James Washington in every draft I'm doing right now because I have a feeling all it's going to take. You know how it works, Drake. That first preseason game, they come out there and run one series together. James Washington catches a 15-yard touchdown pass from Ben Roethlisberger. Boom. It's going to jump 3 rounds.
I think it's going to go like this year. Moncrief is going to get the nominal start because he's the veteran they brought in, okay? 3 weeks into the season, when Dante Moncrief is Dante Moncrief, you're going to start seeing James Washington get on the field, making some big plays, and everyone who has drafted him will have dropped him already, and then, the cat's out of the bag, and he's now your wide receiver 2 in Pittsburgh. But that's what I think is going to end up happening there. Let's slide down to Tampa Bay, where there's reports that the starting running back job is Peyton Barber's to lose. This is the guy last year who put up 963 total yards on over 250 touches. He got 6 touchdowns. Didn't have a great yards per carry. It took him a million. I mean, what's that great stat I saw? He's the first player since 2013 to have fewer than 1,000 yards from scrimmage on 250 touches. I think Peyton Barber's kind of just a guy. I know I listened to Matt Waldman on the Audible this week talk about how, Peyton Barber's really a sturdy player, and if you need 4 yards, he'll get you 4 yards and all this. But, we look at Ronald Jones and we just say, like, come on, man, just do it for us this year. You only got to beat out Peyton freaking Barber. And you can get Ronald Jones later in the draft, and then boom, there's your flex. You're killing it. You're cashing checks, and you got a new trophy on your back bar. Isn't that what we think is going to happen in Tampa Bay? Or at least, damn it, that's my hope, Dwayne.
Yeah, that's my hope too. He's holding steady right now. Ronald Jones is. He's been an 8th round to 9th round pick pretty much all preseason. Back into May when we started talking ADP. The thing I think you need to see, from Ronald Jones in the preseason is we just need to see him flash a little bit. So this is kind of the preseason clues, right? So the thing I'm watching for with Ronald Jones is just to see, is he processing information in a better way? It's like, when you talk to, Jarrett Moyer and some of the other folks on Twitter, and you watch some of the clips, and they put out some really good stuff on Ronald Jones where, they're running a blocking scheme where his mind should already be telling him A or B. And he's like already jumping to C and D without even really processing A and B. And I think a lot of that can come from nerves, right? It can come from just feeling a bit overwhelmed. So that's what I want to see. I'm going to be watching for it. Even if Peyton Barber is still listed as the nominal starter, I'm going to be watching for does Ronald Jones just look more comfortable? Does he look more relaxed? Is he, whenever there's a duo block in front of him, is he reading the linebacker on the other side and just doing and taking the hole he's supposed to? Off of that, is he manipulating the hole to get the linebacker to peek one way or the other? Because those are things that aren't super hard to do, and he can do them. I just want to, even if it's only a 3-yard gain, I just want to see him look relaxed, right? Based on the blocking scheme in front of him versus why do you look like you're running a stretch play when it's an inside duo or things like that? So that's the big thing with me for Ronald Jones, and we'll obviously keep reporting back on him. Mm-hmm. But I think if he can show that, then I think you're going to see the flashes, right? If his mind is slowing down and he's processing better, and then his body can be more in tune, right? I think that's when you're going to see him snap some of the big plays. Once that happens, Drake, he'll take the rollover, right? As long as the pass blocking isn't, horrendous. But Ronald Jones is he's a 2nd round pick last year. There's too much talent to just ignore him for an 8th round pick. He could easily have a route to 200 to 250 touches. Yes, Peyton Barber is probably the more sound running back when it comes to reading blocks and schemes in front of them. But he's the guy that has the 2nd round pick invested, and he's the guy that if he can get his processor working like Peyton Barber's is, he's the one that has the upside to break the big plays.
Let's head over to Denver Broncos camp. They've been working out for a few days, and their OC, Rich Scangarello, I'm going to screw that one up every time I say it. So he's comparing Freeman and Lindsey to Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman. I know guys over at your site there, Football Guys, are gaga for Royce Freeman here. What are we monitoring in this Denver backfield? They got a new coaching staff, so maybe the slate's wiped clean. Boy, you can get Freeman for a nice value in fantasy drafts right now. His ADP is only 88 in the FFWC. And what I like about him, too, this is one of these nerdy stats, man, much better yards after contact than Phillip Lindsay, almost a full yard. He's a good player out of Oregon. I like him. I got him on some dynasty teams. Give me your breakdown of this Broncos backfield.
Yeah, Phillip Lindsay is still a talented back.
Absolutely.
But Royce Freeman in the 8th round is worth it. And I'm at the point right now because this is one of those things that, you'll hear like the guys on the Audible talk about. What's the steady drum beat, right? You reference the Audible. There's a steady drum beat going with Royce Freeman right now. This isn't something that's just a bomb out of nowhere. This has been building. This was building back before mini camps. Then it got reaffirmed in camps. Now Phillip Lindsay was away, but we were hearing, the coaches talk about the running scheme. That's going to be now more of an outside zone, a little bit less power, which is, really the kind of, Phillip Lindsay is really good at running behind power. He's going to follow that guard, make that quick, decisive block. And then where Philip Lindsay is so great, when he gets to the second level, he's really good at manipulating that next defender. And he's also good at manipulating the defender from behind the line of scrimmage. But Royce Freeman, just gives them a guy that in that, outside and inside zone kind of, format, they really like what he brings to the table. So I think that they'll still do the things they need to do to keep Philip Lindsay involved. But if you continue to hear Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman, Philip Lindsay's the Tevin Coleman. Royce Freeman will be the Devonta Freeman. So the thing I'm watching for here, I think it does matter what this looks like in the preseason, right? How they come out and situationally, once we see them in a game where they're going to play their half, I really want to see how they divide up the work based on downs and distance and, the type of situations they're playing in. I think that's going to tell us a lot. My gut's telling me right now that Royce Freeman is going to see more of the work in the red zone. So I think that's another thing to be watching for. So it's one that, again, we'll just continue to monitor it. But to your point right now, Royce Freeman is a screaming value in the 8th round whenever he potentially could see 50 to 55% of the carries in this Denver backfield.
Let's quickly talk about a couple of really bad AFC East teams with the Jets and the Dolphins. So Robbie Anderson is the number one receiver for the Jets. I think Sam Darnold's going to take a step here forward. And Robbie Anderson, he came in and they're like, he's a one-trick pony, he's a deep threat. But he's developed into a pretty good receiver that can run a lot of routes. What are we watching for in Robbie Anderson in the Jets here? That's a guy I think can be a really, really nice wide receiver 3 in your fantasy lineup. Yeah,
he and Darnold started to click down the stretch last year. So that's a positive. But we're looking for this hit with him. We're looking for some of the same things we talked about with James Washington. He still hasn't developed those other areas of his game. And if you go read the news clippings, I believe that's what Adam Gase is trying to do. You hear him dropping hints around this about Anderson needing to be a more complete player that can have a wider application in the football game. Right now, I think he's a bit limited. He may not be a one-trick pony anymore, but I still think he's more like a 1.5 or a 2. What Gase wants him to become is a 3-4-trick pony. He wants him to be able to run, the quick hitting routes, the intermediate routes that are based on timing, the intermediate routes that use his speed, and then as well as being able to uncork the back end of the defense, which he can obviously do that. So what I'm going to be watching for with Robbie Anderson in the preseason is I'm not really going to care about his deep catches because I'm not going to double count those. Those are already in his projections for me. I'm not going to count whenever he catches a skinny post for 50 yards for a touchdown. I don't care. That's already in my projections for him. What I want to see is, can he work the timing routes? Can he work the intermediate stuff? And are they trying to incorporate him more into the short passing game? If you see those things, then all of a sudden he's a real value in the 6th round. Right now, his ADP is probably about right. I'm not really touching him all that much, unless it's best ball, because I still think he leaves too many yards on the field because he can't do everything. But if he can develop those things and he's got a coach that's now writing him about those things, man, he could be he could be underdrafted if he shows that he has worked really hard this offseason and he's corrected those things. Man, you could make an argument that really he should be getting taken, maybe a round earlier than what he is right now.
Albert Wilson down in Miami is just waiting for Tua to come and play there next year, but he's got to get through this season first. And basically, we're hoping he gets that slot job, right? So that the new coaching staff that came in, they're going to bring in this Patriots influence, Chad O'Shea from New England. And if Albert Wilson's in the slot, Dwayne, could we be seeing big things from a guy last year who ended the year on IR?
Yeah, I think we really could. As a guy that, we've told our audience about multiple times, drafting him every single draft that I can. I think last episode we covered a high stakes draft where I actually picked him. But the thing to watch for with Albert Wilson is a similar thing. This is really around routes, right? So he's going to have the first shot at the Julian Edelman role, which is really a combination of the Z or flanker position plus the slot position. He's a guy that they want to move around and motion, give him really good looks, get him good matchups. I think he's going to be the first to get that shot. Here's the problem with Albert Wilson. 8 of his receptions last year and 1 of his touchdowns came on bubble screens. Mm-hmm. And then if you look at, underneath screens and other, little tricky kind of plays, 3 of his touchdowns came on just little things that aren't normal, right? And they're also too big of a percentage of his route tree. So if you're going to be Julian Edelman, you've got to be able to beat somebody on a quick out. He has not done that in his career. Last year, he ran 2 out routes, and 1 was a pick. So, and that's small sample size. Not saying that that's bad, but you got to be able to run those little whip routes. You got to be able to run those little quick option routes, and they're going to need a guy that can be able to get open quickly because their offensive line is a hot mess right now. So he has a chance to be literally within his range of outcomes. He could see 140 targets, right? And this is a guy you're getting in somewhere between the 12th and 15th round of your draft. You've got to be targeting him in your drafts. But what you want to watch for in the preseason is when they move him around, is he still just doing bubble screens? Is he still just doing little drag routes? Is he still just working off of rubs? Or is he showing that he can win isolation matchups from the slot? Can he give a quick fake inside and then get open on a quick little 3-yard out and get hit on a timing route? Can he give the fake outside and then quickly release inside and then work up the seam and find a spot to settle in a zone? Can he do all these different things that Julian Edelman, yeah, he's a slot receiver. Yeah, he's small. Yeah, he's quick. Yeah, it compares to Albert Wilson, but he's also a master route technician. Mm-hmm. So if Albert Wilson can show us a few of those things, man, I mean, this is a bad team. It's going to suck. But if you can get a guy, late in your draft that has an upside for, 140 targets, maybe 150 targets, you got to be excited about that. But that's what we've got to watch.
If not, we'll be talking about Jakeem Grant in our waiver wire segments coming up here in the near future. Let's finish things off with a Twitter poll that you put up. If you follow Dwain, as of course you should be, it's at Dwain McFarland, DWAIN. And you asked the Twitter universe out there, who has the most upside? Chris Godwin, Calvin Ridley, DJ Moore, or Dante Pettis? Now, I answered this with DJ Moore. It's not who's the best value in drafts. It's not who is going to necessarily score the most points. Who has the most upside? And to me, DJ Moore, because I think he's going to get over 80 targets. I think he's going to be the one in that offense with a healthier Cam Newton this year. There's no Funchess anymore. It's him, the corpse of Greg Olsen and Curtis Samuel out there. I really like him. Boy, if he could take that step forward, the Maryland product could give you wide receiver 2 numbers, maybe even wide receiver 1 numbers. So that's my pick. What do you think about these guys? What did people on Twitter have to say?
Yeah, right now DJ Moore is leading the poll, 35%. Chris Godwin's at 30%. Dante Pettis is at 19%. And Calvin Ridley's at 16%. I will say Calvin Ridley has the strongest fan base. I get the most write-ins in the explanations around Calvin Ridley. And a lot of them are, if Julio Jones goes down, Calvin Ridley's a wide receiver 1. And I agree. But I probably should have phrased the question a little more. Any one of these receivers could become worth more by one of the other targets in their offense going down. I'm talking about assuming health to the rest of their squad. DJ Moore is number 1. And here's why. He doesn't have Julio Jones on his team. He doesn't have Mike Evans on his team.
He is Julio Jones on his own team.
Yeah. So for me, there is, with everyone healthy on his team, there is a potential, there's a range of outcomes where realistically I could see DJ Moore getting to 25% plus of the targets. Now, could Curtis Samuel be the guy that hinders him from that? Absolutely. But if I've got to lay a chip down on what I bet Curtis Samuel, keeping DJ Moore from it, or Julio Jones or Mike Evans keeping 2 of the other guys from it, I'm going to definitely say I'll give DJ Moore, he's going to get my vote of confidence in being the one that could actually turn into the lead guy. And it's not that I don't like Curtis Samuel. I do. We've talked about him as well. I love, you can get him in 8th to 10th rounds of your draft. Absolutely another player people should be considering. And this just could work out to where literally it's a 1A and a 1B, right? Where it's DJ Moore getting 22, 23% and Curtis Samuel's getting 20%, something like that. That could totally happen. And that's more around how I have it projected. But again, this is upside. Mm-hmm. I see a clearer path to him having a shot at, wow, all of a sudden next year we're drafting DJ Moore in the 2nd round, because look at him. He had 28% of his targets last year. DJ Moore is awesome. Like, I see that being easier for him. And it's not that we don't like the other guys, dude. We've been talking about Chris Godwin since like February.
Sure,
my gut,
guys. Sure,
my gut tells me that Chris Godwin is. We may have been one of the first podcasts on the air as soon as Arians was signed, like screaming about Chris Godwin. This has been going on, for a long time. So I did an industry mock, Drake, you probably haven't looked at it yet. You can go check it out, but it had like Mike Tagliere, Graham Barfield, several of the guys from Football Guys
dropping over here.
Well, it was through Football Guys, right? So it was something that Football Guys sets up, and they do these mock drafts through the summer. It wasn't really a mock; it's actually a true best ball. And in that draft, I took Chris Godwin in the fourth round, and I took DJ Moore in the fifth. Well, why? Because I wanted them both. I knew if I didn't take Chris Godwin, I wouldn't be able to have him and DJ Moore. I knew DJ Moore would probably fall back to me based on just kind of knowing a little bit about the guys that were drafting, because it was headed back to the other end, which I had Barfield and Tagliere basically on. I was sitting in the middle. I was at five or six, something like that. Anyway, people can look at that on Twitter at Dwain McFarland, DWAIN MCFARLAND. Here's my second vote for this, though.
Retweet
my
that
second.
right now.
My second is Dante Pettis. I would say Pettis is the guy with the second most upside, and here's why. I just went back and watched every play again. You know me, Drake. I do have love for Dante Pettis, but it's not unwarranted. The guy is unfreaking coverable. I saw him put the best cornerbacks on skates. I tweeted out a tweet about it last week showing a guy actually in trail position, meaning he's already past them, and all the guy has to do is just follow him. And Pettis' route was so good, a guy that's just following him, chasing him, fell down. I'm not talking about a guy in a back pedal that's then going to turn his hips and gets twisted and falls. This guy's just chasing him, and Pettis' route is so good. He falls down and beats double coverage. He's got a safety over the top, and he still creates like 5 yards of separation for Garoppolo in like week 4. And these routes are over and over again. And what I've seen with these types of guys, and they don't come along super often, quarterbacks can't ignore them, man. Keenan Allen is one of them too. Mm-hmm. Keenan Allen, and these guys, it's funny when you go look at their combines and stuff, they don't run 4.3s and 4.4s, but man, they have just something about their ability to operate in small areas and, get cornerbacks leaning one way, and then they have these hard breaks the other. They understand their craft. They're blessed with, a unique set of skills that allow them to pair their understanding of their craft with, the ability to make these things happen. And man, I know this is bold, but I will not be surprised if Dante Pettis out targets George Kittle. And I love George Kittle, but I'm just saying Dante Pettis is good enough that it won't surprise me if either one of them lead that team in pass targets. He's really that good. So having said that, I still like Calvin Ridley. I still like Chris Godwin, but the two that have the most upside in my mind are DJ Moore and Dante Pettis.
Did you see that tweet somebody put out about how if Garoppolo was still the quarterback in San Francisco all season and you extrapolate Kittle's targets under him, how awful his season would have been, and how he just shot through the moon through all the scrub quarterbacks that came in, my man Beat Hard and everybody else?
Yeah, I saw some of that. To me, that's just a small sample size. I mean, we just didn't have enough, with Garoppolo. I still expect Kittle. I expect Kittle and Pettis to lead this offense. If you're looking for something to look for in the preseason, it's just how quickly are these guys. Like the problem for Deebo Samuel is, and we've seen this how many times now, Drake, where a young receiver is injured and he doesn't get to be part of the offense installation. When does offensive installation happen? In mini camps.
Yeah.
In rookie mini camps. That's whenever you come in, the coaches give you your foundation that you're going to learn from for the rest of your year. Now, he's there, he's listening, but he doesn't get to have the reps on the field. It's all mental reps, and it puts you at a disadvantage.
Miles Sanders. Oh, sorry, it's up in my throat.
Yeah, but think about it. This goes back to a ton of people like Rashad Perryman and Devonta Parker. I mean, there's a list of a ton of guys that just started off on the wrong foot, and for whatever reason, they just couldn't get going. And those aren't the best examples because those guys now have had 4 or 5 years. There's more recent ones that we've seen where when you miss camp, the installation of the offense, the other thing that's going on, right, is you're starting to develop your rapport and timing with the quarterback. And we're in a league where, it's not like college anymore. I mean, there are more elements of college now in the NFL game, and we're seeing more and more of that, but there's still a lot of it that's based on timing and trust. And so when you miss out on those things, I think it can tend to have a snowball effect. So that's another guy I will be really watching is Deebo Samuel, because I like his game. So Dante Pettis, though, to me, when I think about Deebo Samuel's missed time, Jalen Hurd's a nice new option. Marquise Goodwin is going to be stretching the field, but probably won't be on the field as much based on what we're hearing Kyle Shanahan say. For me, it's becoming clearer and clearer that Dante Pettis and Kittle are going to be the top two options in this offense. What's to stop them from both having 25% of the targets?
Did you see the tweet about my boy? And I've been touting him for months, and I can pull up an article that I said before the draft he's going to be a wide receiver 3 this year. Did you see that my man Calvin Harmon breaking down Josh Norman? Oh, it was a thing of beauty.
Oh, dude, he's I did see it, and I actually saw Jarrett. It's Jay Moyer FB for folks that want to follow Jarrett on Twitter. We had him on 2 or 3 episodes ago. Phenomenal film breakdowns. If you're not following him, you're crazy.
The guy did the show from the back seat of his minivan.
He's amazing, and he's gotten to do quite a few different podcasts since then. Like he's been on with Matt Williamson. He's been on with Matt Waldman. So I mean, Jarrett, awesome dude, super smart guy, and really knows football well. He's got a football background. So if you're not following him, you need to make sure you're following him. But he did he retweeted something, that I saw about Harmon, and where he was showing, some of the similarities between Harmon and what Larry Fitzgerald does. And because I was kind of out on Harmon when I watched his film just briefly. And then after watching it with, watching what Jared had put out, and I went back and started watching it more and more. And I was like, he does have some similarities. And to your point, now he's breaking down Josh Norman. I mean, there's a chance for Kelvin Harmon to make some noise, because we know Josh Doxson's one of those guys that, I'm kind of done.
They have nobody. Their receivers suck. They've Trey
Paul
Quinn.
Richardson's actually really good. He just always never can stay healthy. Trey Quinn will probably lead the team in targets, but I think there's room for Harmon to make some noise, to your point. So definitely going to be watching that.
Mm-hmm. See, look at me breaking down film. I just watched the ACC because, I live in Syracuse, and obviously they play. They played against Kelvin Harmon for a few years, and he destroyed them every single time. But hey, that is what we do here on the Fantasy Football Hustle. I tee it up. Dwayne hits it 300 yards down the fairway, and we set you up for winning fantasy football seasons. And Dwayne, we're going to be doing some fun stuff this summer. We may be hanging out together at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. More details on that to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to that.
So, all right, man. Anything else? Any big articles coming out over at Football Guys?
Okay, yeah. Actually, several things. So if folks haven't seen them, I've had an article on Aaron Jones drop. I did one on Kerryon Johnson's, and these are all like range of outcomes, the projection spectrum, looking at, what are realistic ceilings and realistic floors for these guys. So Kerryon Johnson is out there. Aaron Jones is out there. Odell Beckham Jr. is out there. And then I have 3 articles in the pipe right now. One of them I think dropped today. It's about the Lions offense and what to expect under Darrell Bevell. Over the next couple of days, you'll see one on Cincinnati and Zach Taylor, and then one on Matt LaFleur, which we talked about a lot tonight, and the Green Bay Packers. And then I've got, if you're an RSP subscriber and you are part of the newsletter, you will be getting 2 articles that I wrote this week from Matt Waldman, but it'll only be for paying subscribers. And one will be on Darrell Henderson, breaking down his range of outcomes, and then another on Josh Jacobs.
I bought the RSP. I'm going to check that out. So, well, Dwayne, enjoy yourself on your drive across the southern part of the United States. Try not to drink too much, and we'll catch you back here when we do. And everybody else out there, head over to fightingchancefantasy.com. They're doing a lot of great stuff. Go see Dwayne on Twitter at Dwain McFarland and over at Football Guys. And we'll see you next week or 2 weeks. Either way, keep hustling, folks. See ya.
This has been the Fantasy Football Hustle. We're back next week with all you need for waiver wire, trades, roster management, and more. Until then, never get out hustled.